So I guess the question is, should there be a pathway for
Right.
these peptides that would make them more accessible legally? And that's kind of what RFK Jr. And the current administration are talking about.
All right, we'll get into this thing here. All right,
Yeah.
hey everybody, welcome back to the Healthspan podcast where we talk all things hormones, health, and staying hard to kill. Today I'm joined by special guest Rick Collins. He's the defense lawyer for the Fit and Jacked. So Rick is the most experienced attorney there is when it comes to working on cases involving performance enhancing drugs, testosterone replacement therapy, peptides, supplements. He's probably been involved in the defense of more cases in this space than any other lawyer. And I think I might even heard you say before, maybe than all other lawyers combined. You've done a lot of cases,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I've had a lot of cases. I've had a lot of cases in the performance drug space, peptides, research chemicals, testosterone, anabolic steroids, doping cases. Sort of my ballywick, kind of wherever hardcore health and fitness intersect with the law is sort of my gig, man.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and importantly, Rick is also fit and jacked himself, which is important if you're going to be, if you're going to be representing these kind of people. I think you probably get some good buy-in in that way too, right? So like, hey, this guy's
Oh,
at least has a
yeah.
foot in our world and knows
Yeah,
knows something
yeah.
about something.
Yeah, I've walked the walk. Mike. We've talked. I was a competitive bodybuilder. I came from that background, so I get it, and I've had my foot so to speak in both the legal world and the hardcore communities world, the gym community. So yeah, I'm very blessed to be able to do what I do. I love what I do. I get up in the morning. I have the ability to help people in a very unique way. So yeah, thank you for having me on, Mike.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always good to see you. Yeah, so today we thought we'd talk, everyone's favorite topic right now, peptides. Maybe
Wow.
more, more specifically how the law sees the different categories of people dealing here, right? Whether it's individuals or businesses, from, providers and prescribers to compounding pharmacies to, online stores talking about, selling just for not for human use and only for for research purposes only, or maybe even deeper into the gray market or black market underground, all that kind of stuff, and different different
Right.
categories and where the law stands now and where it might be going.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, let's get to it. So when we talk about peptides, I guess the first thing to do is to define what we're talking about, right? So
Sure.
peptides, short amino acid chains
Hmm.
that have biological function. Insulin is a peptide, right? So
Right.
we're not talking about growth hormone or insulin. We're not even talking in this conversation about the prescription GLPs, the
Right.
Zepbounds or the Wegovy's and stuff like that. So we'll put those aside. What we're
Yeah,
really
agreed.
talking about now are sort of the when people say peptides, and you're right, everybody's talking about it. You go on the soccer field where the parents are talking about peptides. You people on golf courses, people in boardrooms. This isn't just a gym thing. This isn't just a fitness thing. This has really reached mainstream. And so some of these peptides are based on healing injuries, lowering inflammation, and that's what they're marketed for. Some of them are more general longevity. Some are about skin quality and rejuvenation of the
Right.
skin.
Something
And
for everyone.
so yeah, there's a little
Pulls
something
everyone
for
in.
everyone, and the popularity is through the roof. I got to tell you, I've been in the fitness space a long time. I don't think I've ever seen a more of a tidal wave of popularity for a particular kind of category of products than I'm seeing in this.
Yeah, it's really something. And again, like you said, too, all these different categories of people get pulled in. It's not just the gym bros who are, they have maybe have a foot in the world, even with some other performance enhancing things, or even, some underground lab or gray market type
Right.
stuff. These can be, yeah, you say, soccer moms, just regular everyday people looking to
Absolutely.
whatever it is. Like, hey, this thing can make my skin look better. Sue's skin looks great. What's she doing? Boom, she's
Right.
taking,
Right.
GHK copper, and here we go. How do I get
Yeah.
that? Let me tell you. And now
That's it.
there we go.
That's
Yeah.
what's happening, and I think there's two factors that are kind of behind the popularity. One is that I think in sort of this aftermath of COVID, There's a percentage of people who have kind of lost faith in the credibility in FDA and the World Health Organization, rightly or wrongly, not to get political about it. But there's some people who've kind of lost confidence. And so the idea of something being good for you, even though it's not approved or okay to FDA, is no longer really foreign to people, right? I think that's kind of, there's a lot of people who are kind of open to that. And the other thing is, I think people are kind of waking up to the idea that Western medicine is disease-based, and that it's really about fixing you if you're broken. You got a broken arm, the doctor can fix it. You've got some type of cancer, they'll give you chemo. But for the ordinary person who's more or less healthy, but just wants to feel better, maybe, have less aches and pains, maybe get up with a little more spring in their step, Western medicine isn't really focused on that in the eyes of a growing percentage of the population, and I think that has really changed it. And then I guess there's also the Wegovy and Zepbound effect, that tirzepatide and semaglutide popularity has had to sort of reduce the inhibition about self-injection. There was a long time, I think, that only, there was a small segment of the population, drug addicts and bodybuilders and hardcore gym folks, who were okay with the needle, right? And somehow that, and diabetics, but now it's like, the dance mom group is okay with a subcutaneous injection, abdominal injection of a GLP. And so that sort of breakdown of that barrier against the injection component, I think, has really paved the way for acceptance of injections of peptides that are not approved by the FDA.
Yeah, no, I think you hit all the high points there for sure, because people have a distrust of government and regulation and of medicine in general, and you're involved with big pharma, and then also they don't get relief of what they're coming in for unless you come in and you're a medical train wreck. There's not a lot of things. If you have a trauma or some big bad thing, medicine's great at fixing that up, but all the other little in between things, and that's how businesses like mine come up too. We have wellness and hormone replacement, and people are getting more plugged in there. So, but yeah, for sure, it's funny you say too. You see more and more. In the old days, you think drug addict. If you saw like a needle discarded or something like that. We were walking the dog yesterday, me and my wife, and we saw an insulin needle on the curb. It was capped, but it was up against the curb there, and you're walking. 10 years ago, I would have thought, it fell out of someone's insulin garbage, or someone was shooting up out here. But my first thought when I saw it was, hey, that's someone's peptide needle in front of a really nice house. It's like, it's like an $800,000 house in a nice neighborhood. And we're like, no, this is probably, this just fell out of this guy's garbage can. So it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's been a huge change, I think, and that sort of paved the way for this popularity.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. So we have these different categories. There are actually some peptides that could be prescribed, and above and beyond the most tried and true, like your insulin growth hormone, the GLPs, all those like you talked about. But some of these are actually categorized in a way where they can be prescribed, and they're made by compounding pharmacies. And then we have, people selling them for research purposes only. It's kind of a loophole they're trying to get away with, maybe, right? That's maybe we'll talk about here too. Is it really a loophole or not?
That's definitely something to talk about. And so I always do, whenever I do any of these podcasts, I always do the attorney disclaimer, which is everything that I say today in this podcast is for information purposes only, not to be construed as legal advice, or not to create an attorney-client relationship with anybody who's just watching this. So it's information, not legal advice. But one of the things that in addition to the popularity factor is also the sort of controversial factor. Because, as you know, there are lots of people in the medical community who are very much in favor of, they see this as the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? This is a revolution in wellness for a lot of folks in the fitness, wellness, and even in the medical community who are raving about the potential for these peptides in healing, in physical improvement to really be a game changer for our health. At the same time, there are a lot of folks, including those in the medical community, who are, sort of screaming about risk and danger and saying that, look, there is an insufficient database of science, that most of the science is anecdotal. And there seems to be an abundance of anecdotal data, right? Anecdotal data. Half of the guys in our local gyms and are using it. Half of the women in local gyms are using it. And we hear these stories, and it's like, wow, my hamstring was torn. I used BPC 157, and the doctor couldn't believe what he saw. And that's something we hear all the time. And so there's lots of positive feedback that we're getting. But I also have friends in the medical community who will say, okay, there's a reason that a drug goes through phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials, right, before it comes to market. And it's so that there's an assurance of safety and efficacy before people start using it. And if you look at the body of science on many of these peptides, there aren't the sort of double-blind, placebo-controlled human studies that would be necessary and required for a drug to come to market. So you've got this lack of hard science, and so do we really know, what is the proper dosage? What are the right protocols? How long should one use these things? What is the combination that really works? So from an efficacy standpoint, it's kind of, what you hear is working.
Some of these things are going off of just rodent data. And
correct.
Some of that, and historically,
That's
some
right.
of that translates great. And sometimes when they bring it to human trials, the thing's just a bomb. It just doesn't work at all.
Right.
Or
right.
it has some, medications have effects. Some of those effects you want, some you don't. And
Right.
people seem to think, peptides are something magic and special about them, that all the effects are only going to be positive.
Right.
And it seems like there are a lot, in a lot of cases, it seems like there is
Certainly
a lot of
seems
upside.
like.
But is
Yep.
there some other thing we don't know about yet? And again, yeah, you're right. That's why you do the research. That's why you do the studies. Is try to flesh
Right.
that stuff out. Make sure it's
Right.
okay. Make sure it's safe.
So it's very polarized. There's those who are screaming and hollering how because we don't know that there's great danger. And then there are others who say, okay, one of the responses is, yeah, but there have been drugs that FDA has approved that were later turned out that they never should have been on the market in the first place. So
No, it's
how
true.
much can we rely on that? So there's definitely competing arguments, and you and I have talked, Mike, just about, I generally lean like you do, toward a libertarian perspective on things. We do allow people to make their own health choices on things that we actually know are bad for you, right? So we know for a fact that smoking a pack of cigarettes a day is probably not going to be something that's going to be
Right.
beneficial for your health. We know that drinking a quart of scotch a day is probably going to be, have a negative effect on your liver over time. But we let people do it. We let people make all these poor health choices, including eating themselves into type 2 diabetes by poor diet, because there's a personal autonomy value in a society of letting people make their own health choices, even if they're bad health choices. Right. So if we let people do things that we know are bad for them, why are we screaming so loud about things that we're not sure really whether they're going to be good or bad, because we don't really have the data? And so that's kind of where, on a personal level, philosophically, ideologically, I guess I come out on it. The only thing I would say, though, is mature adults, and obviously we're not talking about kids in this, but mature adults should be able to make their own health choices as long as they're properly informed. as long as there's
That's the
no
biggest point right there.
and that becomes the issue when an influencer makes certain claims about a peptide, and those claims, either for safety or efficacy, are questionable, or in some cases not even true. That's where I think there's a valid, issue for intervention, or having, really identifying a problem.
Right. And I'll just throw in there, this isn't medical advice, and they think that they're fully covered, and maybe they are, maybe they're not. You could tell me. It seems like there'll still be some liability and problem there. Maybe you get some influencer on there doing a podcast about, pick your favorite peptide, and the code below, buy it in this store. Something bad happens to that person. I mean, is that podcast or influencer liable
Sure.
in some way? I would think.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on that, nothing that you say is medical advice in this context, and nothing
Right.
that I say
For
is
sure,
legal
for sure.
advice in this context, because it is a very litigious society.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a society where people are, when something bad happens, it's a question of who can I blame for that. And if somebody online, an influencer, somebody who has some clout and perhaps some funds, says, here's what you should do, and you do it and you get sick, there's going to be a lawyer who's sniffing around to say, well, this is the person who told me, and maybe there's merit to that case and maybe there isn't. But as you know, in this country, there's no bar to entry for a civil lawsuit. Anybody
Right.
can sue anybody over anything, and the reality is it's going to cost money to defend that suit.
Yeah. Hopefully they're saving some of those referral funds they're collecting there. I would hope. I always
Yeah.
hope. Yeah, because even past there too, you were talking about the soccer moms or the beauty influencers and all this kind of thing. So I'm seeing a lot of multi-level marketing things pop up too, where folks are
Right.
sharing that with their friends. Just even recently, even more and more over the last few months. Hey, I'm on board. If you want peptide, use my code here, and then this getting drop shipped,
Right.
and they're really not
Yeah.
handling much other than just the
Yeah.
upsell of this stuff. And I would think, maybe even for those people, is there something to it? I don't know.
There's
there
some
could be
level
a
of
string.
risk whenever you're part of a chain of a distribution chain, that at the end result is somebody dying or somebody getting very sick. And I deal with defensive cases of various kinds all the time, and I see very often that a claim of, hey, I took this product and I got sick, that the causality issue is often
Right.
non-existent, but it doesn't stop them from trying to blame and trying to sue. So there's definitely legal issues, and issues of risk. One of the issues of risk that comes up, and you kind of mentioned it before, was this idea of selling these peptides for research purposes and not for human use. And I have numerous cases involving criminal investigations into people who do this. So, and there seems to be kind of a misunderstanding of protection there, because there's folks who will think that, hey, as long as I say that it's, I'm selling this peptide not for human use and for research only. What kind of research? I guess in vitro studies, or
Everyone has their own lab rat at home.
I guess so. There's some mouse studies going on or whatever. That as long as I say that, the burden of legality falls on the purchaser, and I can't be responsible. I don't know whether he's a researcher or not a researcher, so I'm just taking it at face value that he's a researcher. And the government doesn't buy that argument. And there's a theory in the law called willful blindness, where you're kind of turning your head away from something that's an obvious truth. And that is...
Yeah, how could you possibly think there's that many people doing research at home, right? That kind
Right. And the devil's in the details. And certainly there is nothing illegal about actually selling chemicals for research purposes. There are companies that do that. They sell chemicals to hospitals and contract research organizations and medical universities for the purposes of IRB studies and doing placebo-controlled, randomized human studies on particular compounds to see what happens. But those companies do some due diligence to make sure that who they're shipping these products to, the compounds to, are actually doing research. That's a far cry from what's going on in most of the research chemical website situations, which is where the orders are not coming from hospitals or contract research organizations. They're coming from youngandjacked at gmail.com or bigguns at yahoo.com, and the orders are not coming in volumes that would be able to be equivalent to doing some sort of controlled study. They're coming in small personal use amounts, and they're being shipped not to hospitals or contract research organizations, but to private mailboxes and college dormitories. And so, the devil's in the details, right? And so the government has investigated these situations over the years, and I've been involved with dozens of cases where the government says, this is fraud. You're saying it's not for human use, but obviously you're selling it for human use, and you're not a pharmacist. This is an unapproved drug. It's not labeled for human use, even though you're putting it into the hands of consumers, and the government sees that as fraud. And there's been prosecutions and convictions for that, including I've been able to keep my clients out of jail in most of these cases, but some people have gotten jail, represented by mostly other lawyers who didn't make there are some arguments to make in these cases. It gets a little complicated, but I do a lot of these cases, but it's better not to have a case at all. So if you're doing this and you're involved in the research chemical market, you do want to make sure that you understand the risks you're taking. And I do say to people, it's a big market. There's lots of companies doing it. You can find dozens, if not hundreds, of websites selling chemicals for research purposes under circumstances that make that look pretty questionable or obviously not accurate. But the government is doesn't have the bandwidth to go after everybody,
right. And that's probably biggest part of it, right?
So the vast majority, probably, it's like if somebody said to me, if I do 75 and a 55, how likely will I be to get a ticket? And the answer is probably, in most cases, you won't get a ticket. It depends how long you're out there. It depends how far you're driving. It depends, how many other cars are on the road. And there's people who are doing 85 and 90, I'm sure. But you're still breaking the law at doing 75, and there is some risk attached to that. And people should, if you're going to be involved in any behavior, you should speak to a lawyer as soon as possible so that you understand what risks you're taking, and then you can make an assessment of whether you should do this or not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're back again to informed consumer. So again, now you're an informed business person at whatever level you're at. And, and coming full circle on that too. I think that's the most important part, because a lot of these end consumers they're not super informed. They'll start asking me questions about it. They know I'm in this space a little bit. And they're totally shocked to know that these are not approved things. What do you mean? I could buy with a credit card on the internet. How's it not okay? Right. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Someone told me it's the same thing. It's just cheaper because it's from China or something like that.
Right.
And
so I've seen that, and that's an argument that, is often made. And that is that, well, these med spas, these, compounding, these clinics that use compounding pharmacies, they're sourcing the materials from the same ultimate end sources that the research chemical sites. It's just cheaper. So why should I pay that, and when I can get it cheaper? And so, there's two levels of risk to talk about. So there's the one risk of, the substance itself, whether it's BPC 157 or melanotan 2 or MOTC or whatever it is, there enough safety data to ensure that you are going to be okay in the protocol and dosing that you're using? And in most cases, the answer is probably not, right? So, so you're
making a lot of
taking
assumptions
some,
there.
yeah, you're taking some chances. But the other risk is, even if it is what it purports to be, and it's fully properly dosed and properly, it contains what it is. Does it contain anything else?
Right.
What about the risks in contamination? What about the risks in quality control, in purity? And so I've represented a lot of research chemical sites in the context of criminal defense situations, and I can tell you that some research chemical vendors were very meticulous about quality control, and the quality of the products was not really far off, if it was at all, from what you would get from a legitimate clinic and a compounding pharmacy quality. But I've also represented some who were not so meticulous, and where the products in some cases were contaminated or were not what they appeared to be. I had a client a few years ago who was selling, a number of peptides, but one of the peptides that he was selling was actually confused with a different peptide, so people were receiving something other than what they thought they were getting. And then there's also some misrepresentations. I have clients who'll say that the product was made in the USA, and in reality, in some cases, it had nothing to do with the USA. It was, brought in from China and packaged somewhere else, and sent into the country. So, that gets back to the idea that, can you trust the source of your products?
Yeah, that's slippery too. It's almost getting back to, like, can you trust your drug dealer? It's like, you're buying a bag of marijuana, it's 1980, and you're buying some weed from your drug dealer. Do you trust the guy? Do you put something else in it? Is it, is there something else going on here? Or, whatever other drug it might be. It's hard
Right.
to know. Who do you know? Who do you trust? And even if they are some of these,
Right.
I mean, uh, you'll see people can even buy raw materials directly from China too, and it might be the same stuff. It really could be the
Right.
same stuff. But yeah, what happens
Right.
past there? They pack in this into the little ampules that in their kitchen somewhere, or in their bathtub, or some dirty conditions. Or like you're
Hmm.
saying too, some of them are probably running a great business. They're thinking ahead. Hey, I want to have a good product. I want to keep things going. But it's hard to
Right.
know, and none of them are going to let you come and do a tour of their facility, right? If they're doing some
Right. Right.
some borderline shady stuff. So yeah,
And then, yeah, and then I guess the question becomes, when you don't have legitimate sources of goods, when the supply is sort of forced to the black market, you do have more questionable products, and perhaps more harm, right? So, using the analogy of the anabolic steroid market, back in 1990, most in the 80s, virtually the entire steroid supply for the gym culture was diverted FDA pharmaceuticals, right? So backdooring out of the pharmaceutical medical context these, nandrolone and testosterone and other products that went into the gym culture. When 1990, the Anabolic Steroid Control Act was passed by Congress, suddenly the legitimate supply plummeted, and if there's demand and there's no legitimate supply, what happens? Well, you get a black market. That's simple
right.
economics. We should have learned that from alcohol prohibition
Oh,
in
right.
1920, right? I mean, bad things happen when you shut down the legitimate supply or ban the legitimate supply.
Yeah,
And so,
prohibition is just failed concept over and over again.
failed
We just
idea.
don't never just can't seem to learn it, but keep trying it.
So I guess the question is, should there be a pathway for
Right.
these peptides that would make them more accessible legally for people who want them?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what RFK Jr. And the current administration are talking about.
hmm Yeah, there's a lot of confusing surrounding that too, right? So he went on Joe Rogan, I
Yes.
forget how long ago it's been now. Maybe it's been a couple of months, and said, hey, in a
Yeah.
couple of weeks, we expect to make some of these legal again. And for some people, as soon as they saw that, there's all kinds of posts on
Legal.
social media saying, hey, it's been legalized, it's back, all this stuff.
Yeah.
There's so many steps away from what that means, because he's not talking about the ones from the online sellers. He's talking about, the compounding pharmacies, and he's talking about just kind of, recategory, changing them back to the old category where they were. Well, actually, I think the system's been changed a little bit now too, so you can't even go back to exactly the way it was. But it's not what people think it is kind of the bottom line. It's not all back. It's not all legal.
Yeah, there's got to be a new category for peptide products that are not approved as drugs and also don't qualify as dietary supplements, right? There's some effort now to kind of rethink whether certain peptides might meet the definition of a dietary ingredient and be available as a dietary supplement. But obviously, dietary supplements exclude anything injectable.
Right.
So
yeah, that's
if
kind
you're
of the hard stop
injecting,
right now, right?
it's a
whole
hard
different category.
Unless you redefine. I can't imagine they'd ever redefine supplements to include injectable drugs. So it would be an act of Congress that would have to do that. I don't see that happening. And so, what do you do with these peptides that have insufficient safety and efficacy data, but that people want? Is there some sort of category or new category of experimental drug that would make them available for physicians to prescribe, even though they haven't gone through the drug approval process? Don't forget, what doctors do in the practice of medicine is relegated to the states. That's like a state issue. The feds do deal with issues of introducing drugs, right? They police the drug market, but the states really police the medical market, what doctors do. And so I have seen, some situations where some doctors who are involved with some peptides are now under some scrutiny, in particularly if there's an injury that's alleged to have come from the use of a peptide. I think that the current mindset of the administration is peptide friendly and is looking for a way to legitimize a prescription transaction for these sorts of peptides. I don't think it's necessarily friendly to the idea of research chemical context peptides. So I think if there's a pathway that emerges from these meetings that are meetings in July that are slated to happen, it's going to be in the medical context, and if anything, it will be more of a crackdown on the research chemical market. And I see people on social media all the time who are, leave our peptides alone, and why do I have to go to a doctor? That's
You just
nonsense.
want to charge more. You just want to get more money
you just
out
want
of
to
me.
up. Yeah, you just want to gouge me, and
Or
I should be
big
able
pharma
to get
wants
it.
to take it over so they can profit and all these other things.
Right. So you've got very strong feelings on both sides, and I have good friends who are in that camp, and I also have good friends who are in the camp of show me the data, show me the safety. Some of them are orthopedic physicians or others who are like, I don't see how any responsible physician could do it. And I do have friends who are physicians who say this is fantastic, and it's going to be the next revolution in human health. So it's a very polarized situation with a lot of different nooks and crannies. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out over time.
Yeah, that meeting in July, I think it's slated for 2 days right now, and they even talked about another one follow up in the winter and later in the fall, something like that. Maybe it was January, February. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, a lot of people think that that's going to be it. They're going to talk about making it legal, and it's all going to be okay after that. Or there's going to be a panel of experts. I don't think any of that panel is going to include any of your shirtless, sleeveless influencers that you see talking about peptides is probably going to be actual researchers, right, or actual medical doctors, that kind of deal.
Yeah, well, we'll just look at what happened with those testosterone, with that testosterone panel, right? I
Mm,
mean, it seemed like there was, most of the practitioners were really saying testosterone should be taken out of the controlled substance
right.
category,
Yeah, they came out
and
strong.
came out swinging. Except for there was one of the FDA, long term FDA
Right.
physicians there, who came. I think it was toward the end of the presentation. He was more like the gatekeeper. He had been FDA for quite some time, maybe more of an old guard FDA perspective, and he's like, well, wait a minute, let's not do anything too hasty. And so, yeah, we have seen, just recently a new use approval authorization for libido,
Yeah, I saw that.
testosterone
That's
for
interesting.
libido, which, but it's libido combined with, a hypogonadal state, right?
Mhm.
So implicit in that, I guess, is still what are the T levels? What's his total
Right.
T at a minimum? And when we talk about authorized use, it has less to do with prescribing, as you know, than it has with marketing, right? It's really when a new use is authorized, what that says is that the drug company can now get that use approved for its product, and it can put a television commercial together
Right.
to market that for that use to the people who are watching the commercial. That's
Right. Right.
really what it does. Now, will that make the whatever stigma is still attached to testosterone diminish to some degree, because now we're there's maybe going to be more advertisements on television and commercials for yeah, if you're problems in the bedroom and your libido is low, have your doctor check you for testosterone, sort of the combination of the libido and the low
Right. Right.
testosterone level. So we may start seeing those commercials, and that may make many more men who would benefit from testosterone replacement therapy talk to their doctor and set up which obviously would be a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it depends. They have to. Yeah, there has to be someone with a good financial stake there too, right? I mean, there's so many different generic versions of just regular testosterone cypionate. I mean, is there
Right.
someone going to jump on? It's going to have to be something new or different. The auto injector one, or maybe some of the oral
Right. Yeah.
preparations. One of those.
That's right.
One of
Yes,
those
and
ones.
there is a new
No,
oral out there, as you know, that is being marketed and it's patented. Yes, that's really been the problem with testosterone for many years. Is that a simple 200 milligram injection of cypionate is not making anybody in big pharma any
right?
money,
Yeah.
right? So you got to come up with some sort of weird mode of administration, sticking it up your nose, sticking it in your ear, coming up with something patentable and
Right.
novel
Right.
to, I'm not sure that anything works better necessarily than the old-fashioned intramuscular injection,
Yeah.
but there's no money in that anymore.
No, for sure. Yeah, unless they end up maybe combining it with something else, like people are losing muscle because of GLP-1, so now there's some sort of combination thing or combination therapy or something to kind of remarket as a combo in some way.
Right.
But yeah, you're
Yeah.
right, it's tricky. It's old news.
And I'm sure you've heard, folks in your circles talk about the combination of testosterone and a peptide, which is, I guess, kind of a GLP-3, which has
Mm.
become very popular, called retatrutide. And retatrutide obviously is a similar weight loss peptide as a GLP-3 to the GLP-1s, except it's purportedly more muscle sparing, so you could maybe keep more muscle. We all want to, people want to lose weight, but you don't want to be losing muscle, right? You want to be
Right.
losing fat, and so retatrutide purportedly makes the body composition loss more favorable. The problem is it's not yet approved. It's in
Right.
phase 3 clinicals, and I think it's soon to be approved, but it's already on the market, and I think FDA sees that as a big problem, as does Eli Lilly.
Yeah, because what does that do for innovation? And people come down hard on big pharma, but if they don't have, they're not going to make money. They have no incentive to do the research and bring you these cool things. So that drug might have never existed if they didn't.
Right.
If they didn't have this financial incentive.
Well, that's at the heart of it, right? Everybody loves to bash big pharma, and I've been critical of big pharma in many of the things I've written and talked about. But at the other end of the other side of the coin, if you invest $1 billion into bringing a drug to market and play ball with FDA's phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials, do everything, and before you even bring it to market, there's a huge market of people who are using the active ingredient in a way that completely poaches your
Right.
entire investment. You're not going to be too happy.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people seem to be under the impression that RFK Jr. is about to make red illegal. It's going to be, there's no way he's going to cut the legs out from a company like that. It would be such a bad precedent. It would be.
Well, why would any company, why would any Eli Lilly or Novo Nordisk or Merck or Pfizer or anybody invest $1 billion into bringing a drug to market if there was, everybody could just, use compounding or research chemical sources and obtain the same thing without a prescription or without a penny in the pocket of the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, it's not the way the world works.
Right.
It is very interesting though that it's out there and it's so widely used already. I mean, it's huge in the the
Huge.
physique circles and all this. Those guys seem to love it even more. It just
Well,
has
you and
that
I have been
extra-
to some conferences together where, the discussion, I'm sure, you heard the same things I did of firsthand accounts of, hey, I'm on Retta and Test and, I'm 50 years old and I've got a six pack for the first time in 20 years. And so you do hear that stuff.
Yeah, it's wild. Talking about a
and it-
drug that's not going to be out for a year. Like, wait a minute.
Right.
What?
Yeah.
Doing what?
It's you're already on your own. Your own guinea pig. You're doing your own research. So yeah, it's some complicated issues that are going to be coming up, and they're going to have to figure out what to do. I have seen, when we talked a little bit about the likelihood of getting tagged if you're selling research chemicals. I think the risks were less when it was just back in the day. It was stuff like tamoxifen and clomiphene and anastrozole and letrozole, and because they were going to basically male bodybuilders who couldn't get that stuff prescribed by most doctors anyway. You go in looking for tamoxifen to fix your
And they're not big money
gynecomastia.
makers, right? You're not
It's
taking
like,
money out of anyone.
you're not. There was really right, and even BPC 157 and some of the other peptides that are not anywhere near the pipeline.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
don't
no one
think
else
there
was
was
selling it.
there was really no financial loss to big pharma. But when the terzepatide sales started and the semaglutide sales started in research chemical form, that's when I think big pharma started to pressure FDA, and not unreasonably, to say, hey, what's going on here? And with retatrutide, that's just another compound that is really taking away from big pharma. So I have, just in the past couple of months, I've gotten a number of clients in the research chemical space for selling these weight loss GLP drugs as research chemicals in criminal matters brought by the Food and Drug Administration to the U.S. Attorney's offices.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the compounding pharmacies, same. They kind of walk the line too, because if it's not truly in shortage, can they do it? Or
Yeah,
if it's
the
still under
503B.
research too, how do they do that? They have some
for a
out there
while,
that's doing
some of those GLPs were in shortage, and then of course the letters went out, hey, the shortage is over, and you better stop compounding. So yeah, these battles will be fought out in the courts most likely.
It'd be interesting to see how it goes, because that part with the shortage too, because big pharmaceutical companies definitely lost even more credibility there, because they said, oh, it's not on shortage anymore. And then immediately, boom, it's just nowhere to be found, because it really was still in shortage. So people already didn't believe you.
Oops,
We already thought you were
right?
full of crap, and now they're like, whoops, yeah, sorry, I
Yeah.
really don't have it. So that's interesting. It's interesting.
Well, I try, as you know, you and I are connected on socials, and I try to keep people apprised of new developments in the space of peptides, testosterone, anything really to do with anti-aging and wellness-based medicine. So anybody who wants to follow me on Instagram at Rick Collins ESQ, that's a good place to see. As you know, I post some other stuff, some legal stuff, some fitness stuff. I'm still putting the time in the gym, and I'll sometimes post a little workout exercise here or there. And
I think I saw some of your belt squats not too long ago.
Yeah,
those things are awesome. I'm a fan.
I love it. I'm a big fan. But as you get a little older and you don't necessarily do well with the bar on your neck and traps.
It's just worth what it's going to do to my spine. Like, I don't know, but I can crank it and you hit pretpretty hard with some belt squats. So I like
with the
that.
belt squats, you got no back pain whatsoever. It's just good leverage for the knees. It feels good. As people can see, I went up recently to 8 plates on each side of the belted squat for a nice solid set of 10. So,
it's a great, great,
it's a
great quality. I'll put some links in there too. I was just going to ask where people could find you best. Are you most active on Instagram?
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah,
and if you want to find me for legal services, rickcollins.com is always good.
Yeah,
and
I'll put the links
I guess I finished just by saying, peptides are huge and whatnot, but the basics are so important, and both of us are getting toward. I'm further along than you, but both of us are not in our 20s anymore. So really, the basics of resistance training is just so important as we age. I think it's only recently that the medical community has caught up to that recognition. I remember years ago when I was 20 years old, I was competing in bodybuilding. I went and I saw my my doctor, annual physical, and he's like, what are you doing to yourself? You're lifting these weights. You got to stop that. All you need to do is cardio. That's, this is bad for you. It's going to be bad. And even then, as a kid, college kid, I knew this guy, time's going to prove him wrong.
Right.
So resistance training, so important. And the importance of good nutrition is also, and people now are getting more into that. I mean, that's kind of the positive, I guess, is that out of the whole peptide revolution is hopefully most of the people who are asking about peptides have already gotten all the other things right. You're not just going straight to, making some choice about a magical pill or injection. Your diet's on point. Your nutrition is where it needs to be. You're hitting the gym. Consistency, regularity of the gym, so important. And then you can talk about some of these other factors, but there is no, in my opinion, there is no magic bullet that's going to make you magically healthy if you're not eating right and training right and doing all the other things that are important.
Yeah. No, it's hugely important. I'm at the point where I tell my patients or other people ask me for advice. If you're not doing these other things, these medications, fixing your hormones, getting peptides, just don't work.
Right.
And the reality is maybe you get a little bit out of it, but it's just so minuscule and not worth it. You got to take care of those big rocks and get
all
the
of those things
straight,
together. Yeah.
And the other part too is there might be, there's some cool drugs in the works too that might actually be exercise mimetics and some of the myostatin inhibitors and that kind of stuff. Even if those do come out, I mean, do it all. Do the rest of it anyway. Do the exercise plus that. Now you're going to be really, really ahead of the curve. So I think that's a great note to finish on, Rick. That's awesome stuff, man. Thanks thanks for chatting. It's good seeing you. And I hope we could do it again soon.
Let's do it. All right, man. Thank you. Have a great day.
That'd be good.